Turn up the dive, feel the vibe, get ready to ignite. Untold stories in the airways, flying through the night. Experience voices, tales so bold. Streaming live, the truth unfolds. Untold Radio Network, where secrets come alive. New episodes daily, the mysteries thrive. Great guests, super chat, so I remember I share and subscribe. Join the side where truth can't hide. Aliens in the attic, UFOs in the sky. Cryptids lurking, oh my, oh my. Ghosts in the hallway, whispering your name. The paranormal, the unexplained. Become a VIP, get the inside scoop. Unlock the mysteries, be part of the group. Live streaming stories, they're talking to you. Super chats buzzing, join the crew. Untold Radio Network, where secrets come alive. New episodes daily, the mysteries thrive. Great guests, super chat, it's a wild member. Share and subscribe, join the side where truth can hide. So if you've got the guts and you want to explore, tune into the Untold, it's what you're looking for. From aliens to ghosts and all that's unseen. Untold Radio Network, where the world's mysteries convene.
The paranormal, UFOs, monsters, mysteries. You're listening to Talking Weird. And now, from a cabin deep in the Northwoods, your host, Dr. Dean Bertram.
Greetings, all my fellow weirdos and weirdettes. Welcome to Talking Weird, live on the Untold Radio Network. And I am live this week. I prefer to do a live show, but last week I had to pre-record because at this time I was on my way to the Crossing Realms conference in Richmond, Missouri, which was wonderful. I had a lot of fun, met a lot of people in person for the first time, got to screen my film, The Shaver Mystery, and got to talk at length about The Shaver Mystery. Anyway, thank you for joining me for the next hour or so. I'm always grateful that you're spending the time with me, whether you're watching it live when we go out now on the Untold Radio Network on Facebook and YouTube and X, or watching it archived on one of those platforms after the live stream, or perhaps you're listening to the show on one of the many podcast platforms that we go out on the following day. Welcome wherever you are, whether in this great country, the United States of America, or wherever you are in the world. It's the fall here now. It has just officially become fall. We've just passed the equinox, and the birds are doing a crazy migration at the moment, supposedly. There was meant to be, I think, billions of birds in America's skies in this part of the world at the moment, traveling from, the north to the south. My little daughter is so excited because she loves birds, so every night she's looking out to try to see their migratory patterns, and then the next day checking the grounds of our property for any feathers that she hopes may have fallen. Another thing you might be interested in is last night I was fortunate enough to guest on Jimmy Church's wonderful show, Fade to Black. I've been a fan of Jimmy Church for years. I used to listen to him when he was one of the hosts on Coast to Coast AM, and I got to talk extensively about The Shaver Mystery. So those of you who aren't yet sick of hearing me talk about Ray Palmer, Richard Shaver, The Shaver Mystery, Maury Island, all of those kind of things, can hear me do it at length with the wonderful Jimmy Church, who was also already very cognizant, as you would probably imagine, of most of these things. We're going to have a little change in tone tonight, and going into the spooky season, we're almost into October, we'll try to keep this spooky tone, I think, through the October shows, looking at things a little darker and a little weirder, with Halloween rapidly approaching us now. So tonight's guest has always been she's always felt drawn to the dark corners of the human story, not for fear, but for fascination. She's a podcaster, writer, researcher, and content creator devoted to the enduring mystery of the vampire. Alongside her research and writing, she hosts two shows, Velvet Bite Radio, where vampires in history and fiction take center stage, and Vampires of the Simulation, a deeper dive into mind, myth, and the hidden forces shaping our reality. Both are extensions of the same curiosity, what lurks beneath the surface and why we remain haunted. So I'm absolutely delighted to welcome back to Talking Weird one of my favorite guests and my very good friend, Melissa Dawn. Welcome, Melissa.
Thank you for having me on. I'm glad to be here. Happy spooky season, everyone.
I know it's so great it's here now. Are you excited?
I am. We're going to be doing a Dracula play. Me and my husband, who he just showed us comment in October. So it's in this theater that's like an Art Deco theater, Art Nouveau, Egyptian style, and we're going to see Dracula. So I'm super excited about it. Spooky season's here.
That is super exciting. I'd love to go and see a Dracula show on the stage. Wasn't early on after Stoker did the Dracula book. I think there was some stage adaptation which was super popular back like in the late 19th, early 20th century. Is that right?
Yeah, well, I know there was the Hamilton Dean did the stage play that was the basically basis for the movie that would come about from Universal Studios. There was an early rendition of a stage play done by Bram Stoker in the Lyceum, but it was more like a reading of the novel, and his purpose was to establish a copyright on his book, to make it official that he did a reading. So it wasn't really a play. It was just a reading of his book, but Dean Hamilton really adapted it for the stage.
Oh, that's fascinating. I suppose with all your, and maybe this is a good a part to jump off as any into the type of vampire stories we'll be looking at tonight, because in many ways Stoker's Dracula kind of sets the tone for the modern interpretation of vampires in popular culture. What do you think he got right in that, as far as what was based on factual type ideas, or at least mythologies which already existed about vampires, and what did he just kind of invent as literary devices or just stuff to move his narrative forward?
Well, what had already existed previous to that was the idea of an aristocrat as a vampire. It was first written about in The Vampire by John Polidori, who he based that off of the poet brain fog. Sorry, Lord Byron. So that was already in existence, and I think he got. I mean, there's several elements in Bram Stoker's Dracula the novel that are really strong and powerful. One being this sort of journey to the unknown, to Romania, because remember at the time when he's writing this in London, England, that whole area of Europe was considered like exotic and unknown. And so he's writing about these fears and anxieties that they have, or he has, and maybe the rest of the culture has, about the East, essentially, and going in there, and that coming to England, and that transportation of invading good English society. He hits on that note. He also inadvertently hits on historical figures. So he's taking from history. His research was very much done in libraries. So he never left England, he never left London, but he knew of Vlad Tepes, who was the ruler of Wallachia multiple different times in a very unstable time in history where he was fighting against the Turks. So he read that. He read German pamphlets about him impaling people. He read a lot of travel guides about the East and Romania and descriptions of it. So he brought that sort of history that existed into the book. But he also adapted things from his life. So he adapted people he knew, like his boss, the actor Henry Irving, probably played a lot into the character of Dracula, as well as maybe other figures. I mean, society had changed, industrialization had changed things. You had Jack the Ripper that had happened 10 years before this book was released. You also have like a lot of occult stuff going on. Remember, Bram Stoker was a member of the Golden Dawn. So he's up there in society, and they're kind of weaving all this stuff about the unknown of the East and the terror of it, and this idea of this monstrous noblemen coming over to England to invade the good stock of London and take their wives and turn them into soulless demons. So then there's a lot of other subcontext that we can talk about, but I think he gets those element right, and tying that the fact that he tied in this fellow that staked people and made an impaled forest and had such an infamous reputation in Europe even at the time. And his people considered him, a Christian hero, but the fact that he ties that into the vampire is pretty genius. Whether he meant it or not, he hit a nerve, and he hit a nerve with this character because it's gone on in literature, it's never been out of print, and every generation has their Dracula, and Dracula is this really adaptive character that's able to transform and represent something in each generation. And I mean, he has a lot of the playwrights in the movies to thank for that, because of course they've adapted it and changed it, but he started the ball rolling. And the blood drinking from the neck as well, because in folklore, the vampire sits on the chest and goes for around the heart, but he gives this really sensual sexual subcontext with biting of the neck. So he really introduces that, because like I said, in folklore it's completely different. So he has those fear of the unknown, fear of the outsider, a sexual subcontext. It's sort of representing this lustful sex, and not this, unification between men and women who are married. And then there's all those other elements that he certainly does get right. He also writes it in journal form in the book and makes it like it's like their secret feelings that they're putting up. So it's an interesting way that he wrote the book.
No, I really do like that book, and it was I probably, when you read it as a teenager, like whenever you read anything at that age, it has a massive impact on you. So when I did my first European holiday independent of my parents, which was kind of in my gap year between high school and college. I had the In Search of Dracula book by Raymond T. McNally and Radu
Right.
Flasco, I think. And I took that book as a travel guide, and I went to Romania. It was still communist occupied then. Ceausescu was still, the head of it. It was still literally, it was a commie dystopia. It was a horrible place.
I'm kind of jealous that you got to see that, though. I mean, I wouldn't want to live it, but I'm glad you got to see it.
I am too, and I got I think the trains, and then I think a bus out into the middle of the kind of Carpathian Alp area where the totally run down Dracula castle was. I think since they've rebuilt it as a touristy place, but then it was just it was ruins. There was nothing there except ruins on top of the hill. And myself and my teenage at the time buddy, we were both 18, we'd hiked up into the mountains to see these ruins, and it got super dark super quick there. The sun goes down. It's like in a Dracula movie. The sun
Wow.
the sun goes down, and then we're in the middle of nowhere, and we're like, are we going to be able to get out in time? And we're like trying to talk to peasants who had no English. Do you know what I mean? It's not like
Right.
when you may be in some parts of Europe where you can kind of, get by with a kind of, their vague knowledge of English. But they made it clear we weren't getting out that night. And we just happened to bump into a group of men who were sitting around a fire, drinking Lord knows what they shared with us out of their bottle, some homemade, hideously strong whiskey.
Some
And then
moonshine.
I'd like to say they took us back to their old, Carpathian cottages, but the communists had tried to erase most of the culture there. So instead they were these, commie-built kind of, I don't know, like twin plexi structures, but without any soul at all. And the guy let us stay one of the guys let us stay, probably at great fear to himself, or great risk to himself, taking in a Westerner. And I remember, one thing I clearly remember is his bathroom sink had a fish in it. And I was like, oh, pet, like, yeah, it's your pet. And he said, no, nom, 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 like he was keeping it alive and was going to eat it.
Yeah.
So yeah, my memories of But anyway, so it was a massive influence on me, that book, and probably because of the sublimated sexuality you're right in there, which Stoker captured
Mhm.
originally, and then it's part of it's part of the vampire tradition now, really, all the way through to things like Twilight, and and through to who's the famous vampire author with Lestat? What's her name?
Oh, Anne Rice.
And Rice, yeah, with the sexuality in all of those books. So now we think of the vampire as being this super sexualized entity with this incredible erotic power over his victim. But of course, you're right. It used to be this, shambling, revenant, undead, horrible, stinky creature
Yeah.
that we used to be terrified of, not that we would want to seduce us and get into bed with.
It was literally a rotting corpse. You would never, and it bring disease and death to you. It didn't bring seduction. And even in the stories, the seduction that it's bring is a trick. It's a lure, and you become the Walking Dead. So that is literally the mode to get in, right? Is the seduction, but the folklore vampire is just so gross and grotesque, and it's usually sits on your chest and will take your breath away. It'll visit you in dreams. It can infect entire villages, and you become a rotting corpse just like it. Like, think like that new Nosferatu movie they had. It's kind of demonic, but he looks kind of like that movie grossed me out. He looks like a rotting corpse. They were literally like you weren't having dreams and fantasies about these Nosferatus or these vampires from folklore. And I find it interesting. It was devastating for me to hear you talk about how the communists destroyed the culture in Romania. I just That's what I don't like about these globalists and these governments and all this crazy stuff is they're just destroying the heritage of people. But it's that's part of the heritage is this folk stories that we talk about, that we put in, that fortunately was put in books and passed on.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we remember those things, and why they're so popular isn't just because of that sexualization, although that's certainly a big part of it. But I think it does tie into ancient fears we have of the dead coming back, and the dead revisiting us. And it's interesting
Mhm.
just to see the kind of cultural transformations. I did play a film at a Night of Horror International Film Festival in Sydney years ago, which I think was the first horror movie ever maybe produced in Romania, and it was a film called Strigoi, and it was the undead creature, the vampire, and that was very much that repulsive version, with bloated
Yeah.
and not attractive, and I think the original black and white. I know there's the new Nosferatu, which I haven't seen, but the original Nosferatu, which I think they tied
Yes.
just because they couldn't get the actual copyright for of calling it
They
Dracula.
were sued anyways,
Yeah,
and she won. Stoker's widow won, sued them.
and I think that they almost destroyed all the prints. I think only 1 or 2
Yep.
prints remained, and that's why we have it.
Lucky for us, one print stuck around.
Wow.
I
Wow.
would also recommend people to watch the 1979 Nosferatu by, Werner Herzog.
Yeah,
Really good.
I guess it's great.
Really good, visual, beautiful. Werner actually lived in a after the war, him and his mother disappeared to a remote mountain village like that. And so he didn't even know about film until he's 11 or 12. He lived in this kind of mountain village like a gypsy almost. And so when he made that film, he's using real gypsies. It's real mountain scenery in Europe. He's traveling to the castle. You see rivers. He's literally making the landscape a personality and a feature, and it's really good. It's slow paced. Sorry, Gen Z, but it's good.
No, it is great. I'm curious to see who's the director of the new one? I've certainly enjoyed his other films like The Witch and, what was his Lighthouse
Uh,
movie called?
oh, yeah, 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 yeah. That's, you mean the Nosferatu one.
Yeah, The
That
Witch.
is that I can't remember his name. It's escaping me.
Gosh, I'll have to
Um,
pull it up because I feel like I'm like
yeah, Eggert.
yeah,
Eggert.
there you go. There you
Yeah. And then I just did a review on the new Dracula movie, A Dracula Love Tale, which is Luc Besson. It's not available yet, but I found it online, so I was able to review it, and
Is it good?
it's it has its strength and it has its weaknesses. It really does kind of follow a similar line to the 1992 Dracula with Gary Oldman, but it has its own introductions and new stuff. Amazing costume design, amazing set design. It hits the nail on all the period that they go through multiple different periods through history, and just really good that way, especially. And the actor Caleb Landry Jones, who plays Dracula, is a very powerful character. He pushes that. He's the most powerful, you know. Sorry, I'm just gonna turn my light back on.
That's okay. It's interesting how many times this movie can be made or this story can be told again and again and again. We don't seem to tire of it culturally.
Well, and that's why I'm impressed with Caleb Landry Jones. I mean, that's what he's up against. This movie has been done many, many times by many different actors in many different names, and you've got to come up with something different, and you've got to impress people. You've also got to seduce the audience and be this powerful character now, because it's a love story thing. And I think he did a good job with what he had to go with. I was impressed with his performance. There was other performances I wasn't so impressed with, but c'est la vie.
Do you track in your shows? Because I've watched a couple of them and they're very good. And what are the titles of your two podcasts, just for the people who want to listen?
So I kind of did some shifting around. So on Tuesday nights at 7 p.m. Eastern, we start live. We talk about a lot of how the occult factors into life and different rituals and things that are happening. Try to stay no politics, but we talk about that, the studies, and how that intertwines in our world, and how mind control, things like that. But Thursday nights, we do 9 p.m. Eastern, and that is devoted to the vampire fiction, literature, folklore, any kind of guests. We got a great lineup for October of guests, of authors, filmmakers. We're going to do a Dark Shadows night. So I like to focus a lot on the literature, maybe come up with ideas. Like I want to do one maybe on, is Dracula linked to certain other myths in America? Like could the Wendigo, or not Wendigo, but what do you call that? Oh shoot. It's literally in my state.
Like a skinwalker
The
or
skinwalker, is that a vampire figure? Like go different places with it and explore. So that's going to be coming. But I also want a lot of guests talking about their literature. That people are still writing vampire books out there. People are still coming up with new ideas and new characters, to get them on. So I have a couple authors coming on as well, and just kind of go in different places and keep exploring the folklore and different narratives, and maybe do some film reviews. Like I said, we just did Dracula, A Love Tale tonight, went through it. I like to have a structure. So sometimes I'll do slideshows, and then I'll put the slides for free on Substack and people can follow, and I put articles on Substack and talk about it off the show so people can go to my website, go to Substack. I would recommend subscribing on the YouTube channel, because I'm trying to build a community there where we talk about this literature and things from the past, maybe more obscure information. So yeah, it's been an interesting go, just the 2 nights a week, and it keeps me away from politics, and it focuses me on things I actually like. That's me, and not all about some kind of political crap.
we won't go down the political route, but it's difficult when you're mentioning vampires and occult kind of and I guess para history and para conspiracies and that kind of things. Do you think there's a vampiric idea or a vampiric energy attached to various type conspiracy stories? Like there's an awful lot of serial killer or people being trafficked or people being murdered in blood rituals, like these type of things at the darker recesses of conspiracy theory always pop up. The idea of blood sacrifice and things like that. Do you think there's a link there with vampirism?
Well, vampirism certainly can be a metaphor for it. I'm not going to say those people are real vampires like in a book or a movie. I've had guests come on and tell me they've seen real vampires. I have not. So I can't testify for that, but I've had people come on. But I think they're definitely a good metaphor. And when you see it, a lot of stories and folklores, and you hear people talk about vampires, a lot of times in the history, they might be a metaphor for an evil ruler or a dictator or someone who's using the population and abusing the population. Certainly our energies are used all the time. Our minds are manipulated all the time for our energy. We've got energy vampires. I certainly don't doubt that there are truths to those stories of children being used in rituals or trafficked, and that there's still some kind of weird blood obsession with certain people. There's the idea that if you torture someone, that certain chemicals release in their blood, and that is like the prime element that certain people, won't say who, want because it gives them some kind of power. Whether or not it's true, I don't know. I've done a show about Dracula as a narcissist. I've done a show about adrenochrome, stuff like that. So it's certainly out there. Um, again, it's conspiracy. I can't show you the video. I'm not like at Bohemian Grove like Alex Jones. Like, I don't have a camera on me and I can't film that. I'll probably never get that ability, but there's something weird about elite people, and there's something weird about elite politicians. It doesn't matter left, right, flying spaghetti monster. There's something weird going on, and I think they all throughout time, you know, help manufacture these stories, or they're really real. There's something to it. Some of it may be elaborated upon and not real, but at the core, there's probably some real element there that gets exaggerated.
Yeah, the idea of the baron, or the count living up on the hilltop in the castle and abusing and, taking virgins and various people from the town. And there are real examples, like the Elizabeth Bathory vampire case is a classic example in history of somebody who's obviously got serious, psychological problems and is seriously this is a family show, so we can't go too graphic, but enjoys hurting people and thinks that there's some type of life force in the blood. And this is this is a real genuine historical example of
Yeah.
elite individuals taking advantage of an underclass for their depravities and for their longevity. So there are real
Yeah.
historical
Well,
parallels.
and let's be honest, today in science, there's real science pointing to certain procedures that say that, human placentas, different things in blood. They do a vampire facial where they do some kind of puncture to the wound in blood, does something. There are sciences that says, hey, there's certain elements that gives you longevity. It may not be directly drinking blood, but I think there's something to it. Biblically, one of the Bram Stoker got the idea from the Bible because in Leviticus, it tells you not to drink the blood of a living creature. It's not about protein or meat. It's about taking the lifeblood of a creature. Not supposed to do that. Total sin for sacrifice, nothing. And I think he pulled from that and used that as like the ultimate sin that Dracula could do, or a vampire could do, is take the blood of the living. And now we've kind of transformed that to it's all good. It's okay. There's like cults and all these people that do it. But originally, if you're biblically informed, it is like the greatest sin
Right.
it's one of the greatest sins that you can do. It actually turns you into a monster. It turns you away from God. You're taking someone else's life force when God's like, no, you're not allowed to do that.
Yeah, it's weird how that became a part of, I think, kink culture, right? Like people doing blood drinking things within these, and it wasn't even Billy Bob Thornton and Angelina Jolie. Didn't they wear each other's blood around their necks or in a vial or
Yeah.
something?
Yep. She's a good candidate for borderline personality. She's a strange one. They did that. I don't know what they think. It's a really, really dysfunctional way of bonding with someone, that's for sure. And I think the blood thing, like I'm married and I would not drink my husband's blood or tell him to drink my blood. That is a weird boundary that I'm like, I'm sorry, that's not okay. That's too weird. That's weird. Like that's a
Yeah,
boundary that I don't think people should cross,
it
but
is.
some people do, and that's what they want. And I think they have really weird and distorted attachments, to
Yeah.
say the least, that minimal.
I mean, I've met people who I've never known anybody well, but I've certainly met people who have told me that they are into the vampiric activities, and again, it's a family show
Mhm.
within the kink scene that they operate in. Do you know what I mean? They think it's all consensual and
Yep.
it's fine, but it's certainly super strange. Like it's a very strange thing too. And again, maybe it's through enculturation. If you grow up watching and consuming all of this stuff, which is romanticized and eroticized, I guess it's really not surprising that it's become a practice for people in alternate sexual practices.
No, and I think in our culture we've come to a point where we are so saturated with sex that regular healthy intimacy becomes like this thing that no one's interested anymore, and they have to keep pushing these boundaries that are not really healthy for them. And I think that's what the whole kink scene is about, is these people are just, they become obsessed, they become addicted. It's an addiction. And they have more and more and more. It's like I was saying, I needed more and more coffee, but this is even worse. They need more weird sex that can become dangerous. I mean, drinking someone's blood is dangerous.
Yeah.
It could be contaminated. It's a dangerous thing. I don't advise people to do that. It's very risky.
Not to mention wounding a person and actually like causing, some serious blood loss. Anyway, I'm perhaps to bring it back to a less kinky note and a more supernatural note. As you're aware, a lot of the older vampire legends had the idea that these things came back from the dead and primarily became attached to and haunted and made it difficult for family members and people that they knew in their actual lives. Do you think, have you ever heard of, if not a vampire itself, some idea of somebody or some spirit returning from the dead and trying to do ill to the descendants that are left behind?
Mm. Well, there's a whole entire village in Newfoundland that claim to have like old hag experience. So you could see that as something similar. But I believe even in America, um, there were certain families, I don't remember their exact name, but they had a daughter die. This is like hundreds of years ago, and they said she was coming back and she was drinking the blood. People, the other children were having nightmares about her and pressing on their chest and drinking their blood. And of course, in those days, like it was chest that they would go for, not the neck. It wasn't a sexual thing. It was about taking life force predominantly. And everyone kept having dreams about this. And then other children started to die, crops started to fail, they started to have a problem. So they literally did what you would see in folklore. They went to the grave, they dug it up, and they, nailed her shut. The staking, these kind of myths where they stake the body, that was to hold it in place. And then they do whatever else, whether it's garlic or holy water or tying it up with knots. There's all these different variations depending what country you're going to or what region in Europe that you are focusing on. And apparently after they handled it, nobody had any more problems. So whether that was psychosomatic and it helped them, or they did something that stopped the spread of disease or whatever it was, it worked for them and it seemed to have an effect. And there's lots of stories like that, back in the day where people, and I'm pretty sure in Romania, even in the past 20 years, in some of those countries, they still were doing those ancient traditions where they would go to the grave and deal with a body that they felt had the signs of, being a vampire, whether it's they committed suicide, they had a violent death or a drowning, or they just died of diseases and people were seeing them revisit coming out of the grave like a corpse. They would go back and do the job and make sure they were protecting the people who were still living, their cattle, their crops, whatever it was that they believed.
Yeah, I find those traditions extended so recently. I don't know whether it's indicative of the strength of myth and superstition or whether it's indicative of people were having experiences that they had to somehow develop systems which seemed to work to stop the threat. I find it fascinating that the stake, which is always used in vampire movies and books from Bram Stoker's Dracula onwards through all the Hammer movies and Universal horror movies and everything else, the idea is the stake, you're somehow plunging through the heart to kill the vampire. But you're right, originally the whole purpose of the stake was that you were trapping the body in the grave so it couldn't get up at night and come and bother you. You were actually
That's
like,
right. It
we'll
was
keep you in the
so
dirt.
practical.
Yeah,
It's super practical. It's like, let's just stake this sucker so he can't move.
yeah. Sometimes they cut off the head as well, right? Which I suppose is a pretty, a fairly sure way of making sure that the thing isn't functional.
Well, no one's gonna be functional. Just letting everybody know, no one's gonna be functional after that. But yeah, I guess that they're just making sure double get the job done, that it can't move around. They would also do things like put a net in with knots, and the belief was that the vampire likes to count, so it would count the knots and stay there for eternity, which, gives you a different concept of Count Von Count and Sesame Street. Maybe that's why he's not biting people because he's too busy counting. I don't know.
That's I never thought that, but I do know, including that movie Strigoi I told you about, and I've read about it in books as well. Another technique I think was to scatter like seeds or sunflower seeds or rice or something, and the vampire would stop to pick it up and to count it when it was leaving the tomb at night or something. So if it had too many, it would have this almost compulsive disorder to count things. I didn't know about the net and things being put in the tomb, but I'd heard about other techniques that were meant to slow it down, doing what it might do.
Yeah, like if you had the net, it would trap it, or it would be trying to untangle the knots of the net to get out. And there's all sorts of renditions of it. Um, I I don't know. I don't know where it I don't know why they would be obsessed with counting. I
No,
have no idea.
it's strange how then things catch on, and I'm trying to remember. A vampire is also unable um, to cross flowing water like creeks and rivers and
There
things which
there
flow.
is there is that there, and I think it depends. I think there's something specific. I can't quite remember, but there is something about they have a fear of water, running running streams and running water. But of course, in Bram Stoker's Dracula, um, Dracula gets on the ship and comes over. So maybe they can go across oceans because he travels to England via ship, and it crashes because he kills the whole crew.
They made a film.
And it's a storm.
I haven't seen
Yeah.
the film, but they made that film, The Demeter or whatever it was, based on the boat's name, right,
Yes.
recently. I haven't
Yes.
seen it.
Yes.
Have you seen that? I've been meaning to see it. Have you
I
seen
have you know what? I have to go. I watched little clips of it, but I haven't seen the whole thing. I should go watch it.
it?
Um,
I'm
you
curious what
know,
it's like.
that's another thing. A lot of the myths we have, they're not even from folklore. They may not even from Bram Stoker's Dracula. Like in Bram Stoker's Dracula, sunlight does not kill the vampire, it weakens it a little bit, doesn't kill it. That comes in the movies. That comes from Nosferatu, the first one. You said so. We have the book, we have folklore, and then we have film that adds on. And every director is like, oh, okay, well, we've got to um, make up our own myth, or they add to it.
It's a great visual
So
device as well, of course, in Hollywood to see something like, dissolve when the sun comes up or
mhm.
fire, gets blistery skin, or it looks great visually. And that's probably the reason it's remained a popular, trope within a lot of vampire movies.
Yeah, and it's this idea that sunlight is cleansing. It's disinfecting. It gets rid of evil. So I think it was a good add-on, although it's there in the book, but it only weakens him. He's not at full power. Let's just put it that way. He's at full power at the night
In
when he's
Twilight, don't they just glimmer? In Twilight, that doesn't bother them, right? Do they just glimmer or something?
sparkle. Yeah, they just sparkle, and they just sparkle and have dysfunctional relationships with human girls, apparently.
Crazy. I've never read the books, mind you. I've seen some of the movies.
I tried, I put it down. I live in Utah, and apparently Twilight's written by a Mormon, and once I knew that, I was like, "Oh, yeah, I get it now."
But that's a classic example of the romanticization of the vampire, right? Like that these vampires can be good and loving and protective and
Well, I think they present that, but, like, even if you look at Twilight, it's a really toxic love. It's not like a healthy love. It's toxic. Even in almost every Dracula, whenever he falls in love, it's this narcissistic love. Like I was watching Count Yorga Part 2 the other day, and he's falling in love with this girl. So in order to get her, he sends his zombified vampires over, and they literally slaughter her whole family and kidnaps her. Because that's love. It's like that. It's like I love you, so I'm gonna take you and own you and possess you and totally destroy your life. That's what they can't help it. They're the undead. They're narcissistic. They cannot help but make everything awful. Every single movie, everyone fawns over them. I'm like, dude, that guy just killed her whole family.
do you think buried in there too that's some of the appeal, the analogy or the allegory for a narcissist is the vampire or
Oh yeah, I actually do a whole show on that. You can find on my channel. He's definitely highly narcissistic, and one of the reasons I point to is, people will say he's based on all these figures, and that's probably true. But he based a lot of the character of Dracula on his stage manager, or not. He was the stage manager for the actor Henry Irving, and Henry Irving was a terror. He was self-absorbed. Everything you would say was your classical narcissist, and very demanding. Literally, Stoker couldn't even have a good marriage because of this guy, and he had to write Dracula, on vacation or in the evening. It took him over 6 years to write because Henry Irving demanded so much of his energy and his time. So literally, the narcissist, and a lot of those characters are installed or embedded in Dracula, but it's like, probably exaggerated. And of course, Dracula has all these kind of supernatural powers, ethereal things. He literally crawls up the castle wall like a lizard. He's got hairy palms. And I'll tell you, in the book, Dracula is not suave or attractive either. He's a mustached, he's old, and then he goes younger as he drinks more blood and goes to England. But he's not some good-looking, handsome chap like dapper seductor either. He's old. He's got foul breath. He's got long fingernails, hairy palms. He's crawling around like a lizard in his castle walls. He's not appealing either. He's just very arrogant and this kind of like aristocrat that is, feels like you don't question him. He rules everybody.
He's not like the handsome Gary Oldman, even in the
No, and even Gary Oldman's a little demonic in certain places, and same with this new movie, Dracula Love Tale. It's this love story, but he's kind of awful in some scenes.
The original Nosferatu kind of got it right, because the Count Orlok, or whatever he's called, and that is a hideous spectacle of an entity. Like, he's not handsome at all. Maybe it was the Universal version where Bela Lugosi, whether you could argue how handsome he was or not, he was certainly suave and had this mesmerizing. They do this kind of close up on his eyes, and they'd light the eyes, and he'd look all mesmerizing, and
I
women would
think
swoon. And
I think for the time he was handsome. We may not consider that time, but I think for the time he was considered handsome. He's certainly not ugly.
right.
And he has a suaveness, and he had the accent. He had that Transylvanian, he's Hungarian. He had that accent that he was able to convey that kind of European menace to American audience, and Americans were, bought it. Some of them say the Spanish version is better. I've never actually watched it. I think they've got a lot of good shots. They were shooting on different sets at night, and I think they did a lot of different camera work. But I think it's Lugosi's accent and some of the ways he holds his hands and stuff. He had done it on stage for a while. I think it wins over, and he's the iconic version.
Yeah, the Spanish language version, apparently the Spanish language crew would watch the English crew at Universal as they shot, and then so they would have seen it done once, and then they go, we could do this instead, and there'd be a better angle if we hit here. So then they would just reshoot it, and because they'd already done a practice run watching the American crew, they were able to change it up a bit. So
and they were shooting at night, so they were really at nighttime.
Yeah, and that Spanish version used to be. I had a special, and I'm guessing you can get it here. I don't have any in my Australian collection anymore, but I had a special edition of the Universal Dracula, which had a couple of discs, and one of the discs had that Spanish language version on it. But I'm assuming probably when they do the specials for Halloween in Walmart and places where they do all these kind of Universal specials and things, you can probably still get it. It's worth watching. But I mean, it's not as mesmerizing as the original one, perhaps just because culturally that's so solidified in us now as Bela Lugosi as the original Dracula, really.
Right, and I think it's hard when it's a different language. I think that creates a little bit of a barrier as well. If even though the shots are good and the acting's good, I think if it's a different language, it just creates a barrier for you.
Yeah, no, I think that's totally fair. It's interesting too. I know there has been some kind of woke modern interpretations, and in fairness, there's some justification to it. The idea that Dracula represents a foreign threat and an incursion, like it's this, as you were saying, it's this Hungarian or Romanian influence coming to polite English society, bringing its strange, potentially sexual mores, bringing potentially disease, corrupting the very staid, socially controlled, middle class English culture. It's corrupted by the intrusion of the foreign, the intrusion of the count from elsewhere.
Mhm. Yeah, certainly, and I think that'll always be a fear amongst people because, it's not that one culture is better than the other, it's just that when you start having different cultures come in, it creates confusion for people, and I don't think it's because people are racist or bigots or anything like that. I just think people are, if you have different cultures, you're not likely to unite as a people against the elites. You're going to be separated and not understand each other because you come from a different background. So there's a fear that gets, embedded, and so it's just something that is there. It was there in Bram Stoker's time, and it could still be there now, and it'd be interesting to see a movie on it. But yeah, it plays out in a lot of different ways, and I think it could change. Like it's that culture then. Sorry, my dogs are decided to come and make a sting. It could be that the Eastern European culture then because it was unknown, and who knows? It could be a different culture now that's unknown that's people are unfamiliar with.
Right. Yeah, because even in movies where there isn't the idea of a cultural difference, it's often the outsider comes into the community and he kind of wreaks havoc. I'm thinking of 80s movies like, for example, Fright Night. I think the person comes from outside of the community and brings in these, problems. And there's a number of those movies where there's this introduction of the vampire from outside, and when this outsider comes into the suburban, it just
Yes.
destroys it. It messes it up. And so the vampire in many ways encompasses that fear of the other, that fear of the outsider who comes in and messes everything up.
He destabilizes everything. He doesn't have the same morals. He is literally feeding on your blood, and it's definitely there, but he's also irresistible in a way. It's funny. Because I mean, Jerry Dandridge, the vampire in Fright Night, is like he's a good-looking vampire.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's a good-looking vampire. And it plays in it's interesting because it plays into this idea that women are weak and they can't resist that. Maybe that's true, maybe that's not. I don't know. I was on TikTok watching the women post TikToks about this new Dracula, and they are swooning over Caleb Landry Jones. So I don't know. They like it. They like that figure. They want to be seduced. And so yeah, it's certainly a case. And Jerry Dandridge, that's a threat. If you've got this character coming in who doesn't really love any of the women, doesn't really want family and community, he just wants to seduce people, drain them dry, and toss them aside. That's not beneficial for anyone.
Yeah, that's definitely part of at least Hollywood vampire legend.
Hmm.
I think the idea that you have to somehow then compete for the woman you love about this against this incredibly toxic but also incredibly seductive new force, which probably I imagine a lot of people can associate with in the real world. But when you put that supernatural angle to it, it kind of it spins into an even more powerful direction. What are some of your favorite vampire books and or films or popular cultural additions?
Well, I like Anne Rice. Obviously, I read her when I was young. I'm not sure I like the modern stuff. It could just because I'm old. There's Chelsea Quinn Yarbo does some good books about Saint Germain. Of course, I like the original novel. I like Count York. I like a lot of 70s vampire films. They're kind of fun and funky. But I also want to go check out. I was watching a film, and this might be up your alley, Dean, because it's kind of like UFO or aliens. But I want to do a show on the movie Planet of the Vampires.
Yeah,
Such a good movie.
the
I
Mario.
haven't finished it yet, but it's look Mario Bava, yeah.
It's what inspired Alien.
Yeah, it's good. It's so far, it's good, and it's an interesting concept where you go to this planet that's, like, got these creatures on it that yeah,
Yeah, it's lit
kind of
it's
vampiric.
it's literally Alien, but, not quite as, H.R. Geiger weird, but that's apparently where they got the idea for Alien, supposedly.
Interesting. Well, I think I'm gonna like it because Mario Bava has a very unique style. That's a lot different than Ridley Scott, although I do like Aliens.
Yeah, have you? There's other Mario Bava movies which have that vampire element in them as well. There's several of them which capture the and they're not outer space ones like Planet of the Vampires, but I'm trying to think what is Kill Baby Kill. I think is one of them. I think one of the
Mhm.
stories in is it Black Sunday or Black Sabbath, the trilogy one.
Black Sabbath.
Is that the one
Black
with the different
Sabbath.
stories in it with,
Yep. That's
yeah, and
Black
there's a
Sabbath.
vampire story in it. So and when
Yeah.
he has images of the of vampires in that and the backdrop of, Eastern European villages and things, they're
Mhm.
super suspenseful and they're super atmospheric. I love those Bava movies so much.
He gets atmosphere good, and in those days, people have to remember when they were shooting films, in those days, there was a lot less restrictions. They could go into these castles, they had access to certain things. In the 70s, a lot of times for these films, they would just show up on the streets of San Francisco and start shooting and wait until someone called the cops and just disappeared. So you're like literally seeing the backdrop is real. Like they had less restrictions or they got away with more. They didn't do permits. So these indie filmmakers could make things happen. So it's I love watching the older films just because of that. It feels like they're more creative. Today things feel too templated and I mean it's already done. A film's already done and been done. So you have to figure out how you're going to breathe more life and make it anew. So it is challenging and then you've got all these restrictions, you know?
Have you seen
It can
Toby
be
Hooper's
fun.
Li Have you seen Toby Hooper's Life Force, speaking about vampires from outer space?
I haven't. I have
So
not.
it's real. I mean, people criticize it a lot as well as junky and other stuff, but I really like it. I think it's super stylized, super weird, and it's 1985 film, I think, by the director of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Very different, very compared to Texas Chainsaw, but it's worth seeing. I wonder what your take of it will be. Like sexy vampires from
Mhm.
outer space, but super, very much an
Sexy
R-rated
vampires from
story.
outer
Yeah.
space. Yeah, I gotta check it. There's so many vampire movies I've never seen. I get it's just so little time, right? But my friend wants me to watch Near Dark. I was a huge Lost Boys fan. Massive fan of that movie throughout my like even when I was a kid, all the way still now I love watching it. And everyone's like, you should watch Near Dark. But I think it's a little that one's a little darker and a little more mature. So people want me to check it out. That's from the 80s.
That's Catherine
There's so
Catherine Bigelow directed Near Dark, I think, right? The woman who went on to
yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know. I still have to watch it, but
Lance Henriksen in it.
it's
It's a great movie.
yeah,
It's very much a Hollywood version, you know what I mean, with the sunlight being a problem and all these other things. But
yeah.
I think you'd enjoy it. Near Dark's great.
I like I said, when I became really fascinated with vampires, it's not that I hadn't heard of them before or knew about that, but it was Bram Stoker's the 1992 Dracula, Francis Ford Coppola, very operatic, very Art Nouveau. It was like they were doing some kind of art house, practicing art style in a main movie. And I've always liked a little bit of a romantic Dracula. I like the chick flick Draculas, I'll be honest with you. I think that's probably my thing, but a lot of women do, but I'm open. Like I said, the Planet of the Vampires, I started watching that. That looks really good. And I do like the idea of good versus evil, that kind of concept. It's more strong. Like I said, when I was reviewing this new Dracula, a love story, very weak Van Helsing character priest, not like your Peter Cushing. He just wasn't contending with his Dracula. There was no way anyone was contending with Caleb's Dracula. So there's this change where Dracula is the anti-hero instead of the ultimate evil now. And I do like those films where it's Christopher Lee versus Peter Cushing. I mean, I love those.
Something weird happened, I think, sometime between the 80s and into the 90s, where maybe because it had been the traditional horror tropes had been done so often, there seemed to be this change in an attempt to humanize or even turn them into the hero or the anti-hero, as you said, who was the traditional villain. So demons become the good guys, and you can look at Buffy to see that. Like Buffy, the two main vampires in Buffy, probably Spike and Angel, both become good guys. Angel first and then
Mhm.
Spike, right? Like they ultimately become the show's male
Yeah.
protagonists. They're the antagonists who become the protagonists. Angel gets his own spin-off series. He's
Yeah.
this wonderful,
Well,
loving vampire, who's somehow seen the light and is a good guy now.
the first to do that was Dark Shadows.
Ah, good point.
Dark Shadows did that with Barnabas Collins, so they're just kind of repeating it, and they're doing it because of the audience, not just because they want a narcissist or want to do that. The audience response. The audience response, Jonathan Frid as Barnabas saved that show. It shot the ratings up, and they had to figure out a way for him not just to be a villain, but turn into a hero of the family and bring other villains in. So you could say the Hollywood studios are doing it or they're manipulating us, but they're also responding to what we respond to and what we think is great. So apparently we like these seductive vampires and we want them to, be the good guys.
Do you, in your interest in vampires now, particularly your focus with your shows, do you track modern reports? Like, do you look, I don't know, on Newswires or Search 40 and type magazines for stories of people making claims of being, bothered by contemporary vampires, like in a modern sensibility? Like, are there real vampire stories still being reported? I guess is a simpler question.
Well, I've had a guest on who's a vampire researcher to talk about it, so I've had him talk about his vampire experiences. It's certainly something I'll keep putting out there. I want to talk to people who might have been in cults or were a handler in a vampire cult. So those are out there. So I certainly haven't done tons of it, but it's there and it will continue to be something that gets mentioned on my podcast as it grows and as I expand because like I said, I've never seen a vampire, but there's people who swear they have, and I want to hear the stories for sure.
Have you heard a modern chilling vampire story or an interesting vampire story you can share?
Yeah, I just had a fellow on, Dennis Carroll, who told me that he had an experience in a graveyard with someone who he believed was a vampire and disappeared. So, and that was in South Carolina that he had that experience. So I have heard of it. Um, I've been to South Carolina. Damn, I should go back there and check it out.
Just be
But
careful.
yeah, I'm sure there's tons of stories in Louisiana and New Orleans. So I just have to find them. I gotta get the time to go out in the field and find them.
New Orleans is a weird city too. I can imagine if there were vampires walking, they'd be in New Orleans. It has a dark energy. Like a lot
Oh
of
yeah.
people love New Orleans. I appreciate it, but when I was there, I was very conscious that it was there to me. And I'm not an energy guy. I don't walk through life going, "Oh, there's," But I have been in places in my life where I felt, this just feels a little whacked. And New Orleans was that kind of place. Like you could tell there was a kind of darkness there. So if there are vampires wandering a modern, North American city, I can, along with Anne
Well,
Rice, I can imagine that
ac
would be the city.
according to my guest, that's a hub for that kind of activity and cults and beliefs, and then there's voodoo and hoodoo and all that stuff there. So that's a hub.
Yeah, the voodoo stores probably added to that apprehension I had there. Like they didn't seem just tourist trappy, although they were. They also
Mhm.
seemed there was a much more sinister feel to them than if you just walk into a new age esoteric bookshop in most cities. Like those stores felt like there was
Right.
something actually there, or at least to me. I only went to a
Yeah.
couple of them, but they felt they seemed to be a genuine. I don't know what the word is, a genuine influence or force or something hovering around them.
Yeah, I don't doubt that. I've actually never been to New Orleans, so maybe one day I'll have to go. I have been to Charleston, South Carolina, where that guy saw that vampire, and it's an old city. It was named after King Charles II. So it's an old city, and I've been there, and it's got a spooky vibe in certain areas. It's old, so I can believe it.
So, what are some of the topics you have coming up in the near future? Are there some shows you're
Okay,
looking forward to?
well, this month of October, guys, I'm starting off. I have on the 30th, I had to switch around this week because I have Malia Grimm coming on, and she's going to be talking about some vampire cults in California. That's on Tuesday, the 30th. I'm kicking off on the 2nd, talking about how, because I do talk about some occult stuff about history of Halloween, just for Halloween month. But I've got Dan and Ava from Vamp Chat coming on in October. They're authors and they run a vampire podcast. So they're coming on and talking about literature. Gary Parsons is coming on. He's going to talk about Hammer Horror and Dracula. His father worked for Hammer Horror. He's a filmmaker himself, so he's heavily into a lot of occult films and creating that. Walter Bosley and Todd are coming on. We're having a Dark Shadow show on the 30th. I got Jaren Niche from the Obelisk coming on, and I'm sure we'll talk something vampiric. That's just for October. So it's going to be a good Halloween month of vampire literature, vampire film, a little occultism in there, some history of Halloween and pagan beliefs. So we're going to cover that area all October. And if anybody else out there is listening and you want to come on, of course, you can always contact me. Website's melissadonharris.com. All the email links on there if you want to be a guest and you are doing something on vampire literature, vampire experience, or anything like that, and you want to be a guest, you're more than welcome to come on the show.
It sounds great. And when people actually want to watch the shows, where's the best place for them to do that?
The best place is the YouTube channel. You can type, I mean, the links are at my website, but you can type in Velvet Bite Radio. That's what it's called, or Melissa Dawn Harris is a handle, and that will get you to the YouTube channel. That's probably the best place for the community to live stream. It's going to go on that. I don't do it on X anymore because X is too crazy. I literally shut my account down that had 40,000 followers on because it was too nuts, and it was all, yeah, that's a long story. So it's going to be on Facebook, X, it streams on Rumble, and I'm going to be streaming on Substack as well. Once Substack turns their live stream from beta to a wider audience, I have to wait for that.
No, that sounds great. And I already have it in the YouTube and Facebook show notes now, but I'll carry it across to the audio only show notes as well. I have your link to both, I think, your Podbean for your shows as well as your YouTube channel for your show. So both of those links will be.
And guys, I have a lot of free articles. Some are paid, but a lot of free articles over at Substack. So please subscribe on my Substack and help me build that. It's melissadonharris.substack.com.
I'm going to go check that out myself. You're a great guest. Thank you so much for coming on again, Melissa.
Thank you so much for having me, guys. And thanks everybody for watching.
Next week, I'm going to have Heather Mosser to kick off the October month, although you in many ways were the kickoff, Melissa with vampires. And next week, so the beginning of October, we'll be talking about the Bell Witch and cursed objects, which is going to be a great way to start our October. And so until I talk to you again, Melissa, which hopefully will be very soon, and until I talk to everybody else out there, which will be same weird time, Thursdays, 9 p.m. Central, same weird network, the Untold Radio Network, please keep it weird.